Hey, book lovers! Tomorrow is Halloween, which means that we are in fall. The air is crisp. It is time for hot cider, hot cocoa, wrapping up in a blanket with a good book. And if you're looking for a new blanket, a new down alternative comforter, or a new quilt, or some new beautiful patterned duvet covers, or maybe you're just looking for sheets, or maybe you want the whole thing, you want a whole new seasonal look, then you should check out linensandhutch.com. Linens and Hutch has classic colors. They have an amazing selection of bedding for all of your needs in terms of sheets, blankets, mattress toppers, and they have incredible prices. So not only do they work directly with manufacturers and designers, but that enables them to cut out the middle person, which then enables them to pass those savings on to you. If you go to linensandhutch.com and use the promo code GSMCBOOK at checkout, you will receive 70% off everything on their website, plus free shipping. That is not a bad deal. You really can't complain about that. Again, the website is linensandhutch.com. The promo code at checkout is GSMCBOOK, and they will give you 70% off your entire order, off everything on their website. You'll get free shipping, and they offer classic colors, great products, and you should definitely check them out.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and it is Friday. It is the weekend. Not only is it Friday, it is the Friday before Halloween. It is the Friday before a full moon. It is the Friday before daylight savings time ends. Tomorrow is just going to be busy and maybe a little crazy because of everything that's going on. But hopefully you have some safe Halloween plans happening, not only normal safety, in terms of everything that we talk about every year for Halloween safety, but also COVID safety. Be careful out there. Don't do anything crazy just to go get a little chocolate or whatever kind of Halloween candy you like. At any rate, I mentioned at the end of the last episode that I had 3 words for you for this particular episode, and those 3 words are pirate, murder, mystery. And what could be more appropriate for the day before Halloween than talking about a pirate murder mystery? Well, maybe talking about a pirate murder mystery series, because that's what we have today. Today I am speaking with Steve Goble about the 3rd book in his Spider John mystery series. That book is called A Bottle of Rum. It's 1723. Spider John and his friend Odin, no longer marooned in the Caribbean, believe they have left the pirate life behind. All Spider wants is to finally return to his beloved M, but the murder of a shady innkeeper threatens to keep Spider permanently landlocked. Spider cares little who stabbed the lazy bastard, but the first clue discovered ties the death to his wayward young friend, Hob, last seen sailing away with the notorious Anne Bonny. Odin calls it a foolish errand, but Spider is determined to find the lad and drag him away from the piratical life. The bloody trail weaves from ambushed smugglers to a country madhouse and finally to a dangerous figure from Spider's past, the deadly half-Jim Fox. Soon, Spider and Odin find themselves caught between a madman's ambition and vengeful pirates as more bodies are tumbled into fresh graves. And Spider can't help but wonder if Hob is already lying beneath the cold ground. So if you have read the first 2 Spider John mysteries, then a lot of that is going to pique your interest. You're going to know some of those character names. If you have not read the series, I would think that that would still pique your interest. It certainly did with mine. You've got not only pirate adventure kind of stuff, which is a very popular genre, but you've got a pirate in the form of Spider John, who is a good person at heart. He has lived a pirate's life, and there are reasons for that, but he also cares for the widow who is left after her husband is murdered in their pub, in their inn. He wants to help her. He wants to find his friend Hob. He is very loyal. He cares about the people around him. And so you've got that aspect of it. But then there's also just lots of good adventure and lots of intrigue and mystery. As it says here, you've got smugglers, a madhouse, you've got mysterious figures from the main character's past. Lots of stuff happening in this book. Of course, it wouldn't be a mystery without lots of twists and turns, right? Spider John, as I said, is the main character, and he is a reluctant pirate. At least in the beginning. I don't know. I haven't read the first 2 books yet. Maybe he found ways of being a pirate that he enjoyed, but mostly he just is trying to get home to his wife and son, whom he hasn't seen in many, many years, and he is a good man at heart. His friend Odin, not so sure what to say about Odin, except that he's extremely interesting and larger than life, funny, acerbic. All those good kind of, sidekick, friend, get a grip person you have in a secondary character. He definitely cracked me up. So that is just a bit of an overview of A Bottle of Rum. Again, it is by Steve Goble, and it is the 3rd Spider John mystery in that series. So let's go ahead now and turn to the interview with Steve.
Hi, Steve. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
I am looking forward to it as well. Thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about your new mystery. It's called A Bottle of Rum. But before we get to the mystery and the mystery series that it's a part of, if you could share a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Well, sure. I'm a lifetime Ohio resident and was in community journalism for more than 30 years. I now work for a cybersecurity agency in Cleveland, Ohio, and write murder mysteries in my spare time. I'm a bit of a country boy and like to live out in a quiet rural area with my wife and my kid and our 2 dogs, which you heard earlier.
Yes, I did. My husband grew up in Ohio as well, so I am sort of familiar with the Cleveland area.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in southern Ohio and then worked in various places across the state, and now I'm up north.
Nice. So as I said, the book is called A Bottle of Rum, and it is a Spider John mystery. So this is the 3rd in that series. Can you start by giving an overview of the series itself?
Well, sure. Spider John is a pirate in the 1720s. He grew up in the American colonies, went sailing, and ended up, not by any choice of his own, but because the ship he was working on was attacked, he was forced into a life of piracy. And when the first book starts, he's been among the pirates for about 8 years, trying to find a way to get out. It's like a lot of organized crime organizations. Once you get in, it's very difficult to leave. So he's basically a good man trying to get out of the life of piracy and get back home to a wife and kid. The kid was just a babe in arms when he last saw him. So I'm sort of riffing on the Odyssey a little bit. A man trying to get home, and I throw book after book full of dangers and perils in his way.
Oh, you're so mean. Poor John. He doesn't need all of that.
I think it was Stephen King or something who said he likes to create good characters that people will like and then put them through hell.
Yeah.
So I do a little bit of that to Spider and his friends, I guess.
Yes. So, like I said, this is the third book. Give an overview then of the story that takes place in this book.
Well, in A Bottle of Rum is a bit of a departure from the first two books. The first two books were set almost entirely at sea. They were shipside mysteries. The first one was a friend of Spider's is murdered early on, and spends the rest of the voyage trying to figure out who did it. The second book is a locked room mystery on a ship. The third book, A Bottle of Rum, is set in England in a smuggling community, and Spider ends up looking for a lost comrade who has gotten himself into quite a bit of trouble. He and Odin end up encountering pirates and smugglers and a strange mental facility and other assorted characters while they try to find out what's happened to their friend and how they can get him out of his jam.
They encounter quite a lot of strangeness, strange situations in this book, and some interesting characters. And of course, I don't want to give too much away, but it's
yeah, that's always a hard question for me to answer too, since I'm writing mysteries. I don't want to detail too much of the plot in my replies. But I can say this, that I try very, very hard not to write the same book over and over. So, I have a recurring cast of characters, but I'm going to put them into what I hope are very different situations and settings throughout the series, just so that readers can experience something different if they follow along. I don't like reading a series that feels like it's the same book again and again and again.
Yeah, it gets a little formulaic after a while sometimes.
Yeah, I really, really strive to avoid doing that.
Yeah. So what was your inspiration for this particular setting and story?
Well, the setting, I think the inspiration for that was basically my desire not to write another mystery at sea. That very specifically had that idea going in. I wanted to put Spider into a situation where he was encountering different kinds of trouble. And so I went from there with, what kind of mystery might he encounter on land and what would draw him into it. And fortunately for me, the pirate life itself leads to a lot of unsavory connections and things like that are going to keep cropping up. I think it's likely that Spider's piratical past is going to follow him pretty much anywhere he goes. But, once I decided it's going to be a story set on land, I decided smuggling is related to piracy, so I would involve something there. And once I did that, I kind of thought, okay, how could Spider get in trouble with smugglers? And boom, there we went.
Now that you've learned a little bit about the Spider-John mysteries as a series, you've learned a little bit more about A Bottle of Rum as the latest book in that series. We're going to take our first break of the podcast, and when we come back, we'll be talking more about Spider-John as the main character and, what about him might appeal to readers of this series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Today I am speaking with author Steve Goble about his Spider John mystery series and the current book in that series, A Bottle of Rum. So let's go ahead and turn now back to the interview with Steve.
What about Spider himself? Can you talk a little bit about him as the main character, and what about him might resonate with readers?
Sure. I think the thing that probably readers would most connect with as far as Spider is concerned is that he is basically a good person. He never wanted to be a pirate. He definitely wants to get out of that business. So he spends a good deal of his time concerned about his wife and kid that he wants to get back to. But he's also a very loyal friend. And throughout the series of books, the collection of characters that kind of link their lives to his grows and grows a little bit. And I think you learn about Spider that he'll do just about anything to help a friend in need or a friend in trouble. And I think a lot of people feel like that too. You know, the people that they care about, they want to help out, and they'll take risks for them, etc. So I think those are the things that readers might want to or might connect with Spider. Excuse me. I think those are the kind of things that people are going to enjoy about him. As far as where he fits in with other detectives, he is, of course, outside the law. Being a pirate in the 1720s, he can't call Scotland Yard or anyone else to come and help out. So often in the situations he finds himself in, he becomes an agent of justice himself. He just can't turn it over to the cops or to the courts or anything like that. In fact, he spends a good deal of time hiding from cops and courts and trouble. So that makes him a little bit different. He is illiterate, as were many of the men who sailed the seas, either on merchant vessels or the Navy or on pirate ships. They weren't always educated men. They might be quite smart and very good at what they do, but they weren't well read by any stretch. And Spider himself cannot read. So I think that makes him a little bit different too. His manner to approaching crime is he sort of throws a monkey wrench into things sometimes and tries to knock a clue loose. He relies on intuition perhaps a bit more than a lot of fictional detectives. I would call him clever despite the fact that he has no formal education. He's also a carpenter, so, a hard-working guy. So I think readers might connect with that as well.
He says, or one of the other characters says about him at one point in the book, that puzzles are like an itch on his brain, and he can't just let them go. But at the same time, trying to solve those puzzles gets him into a bit of some tight spots, especially in this book, and I assume in the other two books as well.
Yes, he definitely is the kind of person who doesn't like loose ends. He likes to try to connect the dots. And yes, he always finds himself in some kind of trouble in one way or another. One of the things, I said a moment ago, I want to write a different book every time, but there are some common things you're always going to find. One is there will always be a fairly good mix of sleuthing and action adventure. I think if anyone who picks up a book about a pirate is going to expect a certain amount of swordplay and a certain amount of gunplay and that kind of thing. So, I am going to continually put Spider into tight spots, and quite often he and his friends are going to have to fight their way out of them.
Speaking of friends, he gets himself into this tight spot partly because he is trying to find a missing friend, but his companion throughout the book is Odin. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between Spider and Odin, because they're a bit of an odd couple?
They are a bit of an odd couple. They met in book one when Spider was a new person aboard a pirate ship, and Odin was in book one pretty much just a scary guy. it took a while for him and Spider to connect as friends. Odin himself is of undeterminate age, but he has survived in piracy for a very long time. Compared to many other people, it tends to be a profession with a low life expectancy. But Odin has somehow survived, and he claims to have sailed with Blackbeard. He also loves to tell tall tales and keep people on edge. So I kind of feel like Odin in my books is sort of my connection to the pirates of legend. There's all kinds of stories about how Blackbeard swam around his ship several times after he was killed, and things like that, and all kinds of swashbuckling and daring deeds. I try to keep my books more in the realm of reality. I try to keep the action mostly believable and the consequences of violent acts believable, etc. But I can always have Odin tell an old story about something he claims he witnessed, perhaps Blackbeard doing a filthy thing to a shark or whatever. He provides that legendary aspect that I think a lot of people expect with pirates, whether, and readers can choose whether to believe Odin's tales or not. Spider believes about half of them and tries to ignore the others. But because of their shared adventures and escapes and things like that, the two of them have kind of come to rely upon one another and see one another as friends. I like Odin because he will call Spider on his crap when Spider's going off on a tangent or something like that. And I like Odin because he's unpredictable. He often sends the books off on a tangent himself.
I always find it fascinating when authors talk about how characters just suddenly do something unexpected. And
oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And I have a trick for that too. After part of my writing process, after I write a chapter or a scene or whatever, I walk away from it for a little bit, and then I start viewing that chapter through the perspective of every character in the book. So, the chapter might be Spider sneaking into somebody's cabin to, peek at something. And I'll write the whole thing with just Spider doing whatever he's doing. But after I've written it, I'll come back to it. Okay, now how would Odin react to what Spider's doing? Would he, be upset at Spider for taking action on his own? Would he applaud it? Would he suspect Spider of maybe, stealing some treasure or something and not sharing it? Whatever. And I do the same thing with Spider's other friends and the main antagonists in the book as well. Just try to look at everything from each character's perspective. And it doesn't always end up in the book, but quite often I'll discover that, when you think of this situation through Odin's brain, that implies some other things that need to happen in the book, or it suggests other plot developments or problems that I'll need to have Spider work his way through. I think doing that, I think you get better supporting characters, and I think you get a better just mix of things going on rather than just looking at everything strictly from Spider's vantage.
Yeah, because your point of view is it's not first person or anything, but you still get most of the book from Spider's. It's not totally first person, but it's from his perspective.
Right. Yeah, and that's coming from mysteries. I read mysteries voraciously, and I have since I was very, very young. And I think a lot of the time, one of the things I liked about reading mysteries was trying to solve them as I read. And I think if I keep the perspective of the story as told from everything Spider encounters and does, etc., I think then the reader gets to see all the clues, hear all the clues, and see how Spider's thinking about the clues as they go along. When I'm writing a mystery, I don't jump usually from Spider's perspective, and then in the next chapter from somebody else's, and the third chapter from yet another. That's a perfectly fine literary technique, and if I were writing some other kind of book, I probably would use it. It would make my life easier in many ways. But because I want to give my readers a chance to solve the mystery along with Spider, I want them to pretty much stay in Spider's head throughout the story.
In terms of the story, what kinds of research did you do?
For this particular one, I did a little bit of research on smuggling techniques and that kind of thing. I also had to do a little bit of research regarding some historical pirates for earlier books, and some of that came into play for this one too. For all of the Spider John books, I've done a lot of reading of accounts from trials. Occasionally a pirate would get caught and would end up before a court. And so there was testimony and records that you could look at to see how they described what happened at sea and what they did. I have to take a certain amount of that, or I have to take that with a certain amount of salt, though, because they were criminals, they were pirates, and they probably lied quite a bit. You know, if you're being tried for piracy and accused of killing several people or whatever, you're probably going to say, no, I didn't kill them. I was a witness, though. I saw this other guy did it. Diminish your own role in the crimes and maybe embellish the roles of others. So I don't take anything a pirate testified to court or testified to in court as gospel, but you do get an idea of how they operated and how they worked. I don't even call this research, really. I'm so interested in pirates anyway that, I read these books and articles and things, and I would be reading them all whether I were writing pirate novels or not. So it's almost more just fun to me than research. Research sounds like work.
Right. I'm thinking that's got to be fascinating to read some of the trials, just the things that you learn and kind of reading between the lines on other things.
Yeah. For Pieces of 8, which is the next Spider John book coming out in March of next year, I leaned on an account written by Cotton Mather, of all people, at a New England pirate hanging when dozens of pirates were all hung at once. And they had the pirates recite their crimes and beg people who were in the crowd to avoid the life of piracy and don't go, down the path I walked, as the pirates were trying to redeem their souls by saving others. And, it was almost sort of a tough love kind of thing. It would tell you these horrible stories of what we did and what happened so that you can avoid walking this path. And it's, that kind of stuff is pretty amazing reading.
Yeah, kind of the pirate version of Scared Straight.
Scared Straight. That is the term I was trying. When I said tough love, that's what I was trying to come up with. Yes, it very much was Scared Straight before its time.
Things I never anticipate saying in a podcast. The pirate version of Scared Straight. Never thought I'd utter that sentence. Probably in life at all, let alone on a podcast. But I love the places conversations take me and the authors that I speak to. We're going to go ahead and take that second break of the podcast, and when we come back, we'll be talking about some of the historical figures that feature in the series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking with Steve Goble about his new book, A Bottle of Rum. As you have no doubt picked up on, it is historical fiction, and as such, there are some historical figures who feature in not only this book, but in the previous two books. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like writing historical figures in historical fiction.
You mentioned historical figures, and I'm glad you did, because I did want to ask you about that. How do you decide which historical characters you want to put in, and how prevalent their role will be, how accurate you want them to be in terms of being a historical character?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Plot needs are the main thing. I wanted, for instance, Anne Bonny, a famous female pirate. I wanted to make her a part of the second book. There weren't a lot of women at sea on pirate vessels, so there were a handful of choices, and she was probably the best known one. But I very much wanted to have a bit of a diverse cast. I don't want to write a boys' club. I want a mix of people. I want men. I want women. I want young people, old people, gay people, etc. And so I'm working those in as best as I can. And Anne Bonny just gave me the opportunity to have a female character who would be at sea, and somebody that Spider might very well have run into. I had to find a sort of an empty area in her known career, so that it was plausible that she might be in that same area at that time, and that Spider might run into her, etc. Because I don't want somebody reading my book and say, "Oh, this is 1722," and he says Anne Bonny is here in the Caribbean, but really she was in New York Colony at that time doing something or whatever. So I'll find a gap and tell myself it's plausible that Anne Bonny might have been in this area and in this role at this time, and I'll go ahead and take advantage of that. I also, at the end of the book, in the afterword, I'll almost always remind people I'm a storyteller and not a historian. And someday somebody might find a trunk somewhere that has a letter written by Anne Bonny that proves that she was nowhere near where I said she was. And that's just a danger that I'm going to have to face. But I'm primarily focusing on my own characters and their situation, because I can control that. My inventions are what I'm primarily focusing on. As far as other historical characters, you almost have to mention Blackbeard at some point, but he's dead by this point in my narrative, and the mentions are all coming from Odin. And I think any reader will quickly realize that Odin can't really be trusted that much, especially when he's talking about his sailing days of yore. So I handle Blackbeard almost as a legendary figure. I did a similar thing with Ned Lowe, who was one of the nastier, more sadistic pirates. He loved to torture his victims, sometimes reputedly tortured his own crew members if they displeased him. But again, he's sort of in the background of the second book. He doesn't actually come onto the page, but characters in the book have encountered Ned, so they talk a little bit about his activities and the things he's done, and their fear of running into him drives the plot a little bit too.
When I think of scary pirates, the first name that comes to mind is not Ned. Ned should he needs a better name.
It's not a scary name. It's not a scary name, but I think if you had been a victim at sea, you would probably prefer to run into Blackbeard than Ned Lowe.
Right.
Ned
yeah.
would burn people. He'd cut off body parts, and just he was in it to hurt people by most accounts. Blackbeard, no paragon of virtue certainly, but a lot of the mythology built up around Blackbeard was an intentional mythology that he developed. Figuring if victims fear me, if people are afraid of me, they will give up, they will give me their stuff and let me go on my way. So yeah, I wouldn't want to run into either one of them. But
right.
If I have to pick my which one's gonna rob me, I think I'd go with Blackbeard.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any autobiographical elements in the book?
No, not really. I'm a modern man in landlocked Ohio. I did not live a life at sea or anything like that. Spider's personality is rather different from mine. I don't really identify with any of the characters in any kind of an autobiographical sense. I think maybe some of the things that I find amusing, Spider finds amusing. He has a bit of a dry sense of humor, and I think he maybe gets that from me. But for the most part, no.
The fourth book you said is called Pieces of Eight. What can you say about the plot of that book without giving too much away?
Well, I can tell you that it takes place in Nantucket, or a good portion of it takes place in Nantucket. This upcoming book is almost evenly divided between adventure at sea and an investigation on land. Spider goes to Nantucket, which anyone who's read any of the first three books knows that's where he is expecting to find his wife and kid. So he finally gets back to Nantucket, and then things go horribly wrong. And I think it's probably all I want to say about that.
Okay. Of course they go horribly wrong because, we're putting him in terrible situations.
Exactly. Good people put them through hell. This one might be one of the worst situations I put Spider through yet.
Oh, my. Okay. And you said that comes out in March.
I believe so, yes. I know it's early next year. I'm pretty sure it's March.
Okay. Do you have an overall arc in mind for the series? Do you have a specific number of books in mind, or how is that going for you?
I definitely have further adventures of Spider plotted out. I have notes and outlines for 2 more books. I don't have a set number of books or anything like that. A mystery series is different from a fantasy series. Something like Lord of the Rings, you've got a definite trilogy thing going on and long story, but there's one overall kind of thing. I'm riffing off of the Odyssey more than anything else, and a series of adventures, which I'll happily keep writing as long as people keep reading them and publishers keep paying for them. So I assume there might come a day when I think I've had enough of Spider, but it's going to be a long way off.
In non-Spider book news, you also have a modern-day detective novel called City Problems. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I believe it or not, I ended up with 2 novels coming out next year. That City Problems will publish from Ocean View Publishing in July. And it is sort of a hard-boiled detective novel featuring a sheriff's detective in rural Ohio who goes through a bit of an emotional missing kids case that kind of puts him through the ringer. And that one will be coming out in July, and I'm really excited about it. I sort of worked on that one between Spider John novels because I always knew I wanted to write a first-person, hard-boiled detective kind of story. And I just happened to have that one in the background. Got some time between Spider books to finish it up. Sent it to my agent, and I kind of thought, well, most of the Spider John books were being published in the fall, so maybe we can aim to have these published in the summer if somebody buys them. And I had no idea how long it would take for a publisher to pick that series up. Anyway, you never know when you set your babies out what's going to happen to them. And the way things worked out, the Spider John book that might have ended up on the shelves right now, which is Pieces of Eight, got delayed until early next year. And the detective series sold way faster than I thought it would. I love my agent for doing this. But that one sold to Ocean View, and they moved quickly and had a spot on their release calendar. So I have 2 books coming out next year within just a few months of each other, and I have no idea how I'm going to have the release parties and book events, and I'll just have to figure that all out. But it's going to be fun.
And hopefully next year is less crazy than this year, but we have no way of knowing what will be happening.
Yeah, we really don't. We really don't. I've done a couple of online things. The Ohio Book Festival, which is a wonderful, wonderful event here in the Buckeye State, was all virtual this year, and I got to do a panel, and I got to watch other panels online. But you really miss that opportunity to connect with readers and see the look on their faces when you're talking to them, and hear their questions and everything else. It's when you tell people you write pirate murder mysteries, you get 2 kinds of reactions. You get people who kind of look at you funny and wonder why in the hell anyone would do that. And then you get the people who pirate murder mystery, and their eyebrows go up and they smile a little bit, and you realize that's one of my people right there. And so they ask questions, and you talk to them, and you get to meet other authors and find out what they're reading. And you can pick up a book and browse through it and say, oh my gosh, I have to buy this. A lot of book events I go to, and I have a goal to try to not buy as many books as I sell. I'm a book person, and you put me around that, and I'm just going to gobble them all up. But I really miss that atmosphere of book events, and I really, really hope that we're able to get back to that before too long. We'll just have to see. In the meantime, I'm ready for any library clubs, book clubs, discussion groups that want me to jump in on a Zoom call and answer questions or do readings or anything like that. Hit me up. I'm be happy to do it.
What then are you working on now? Are you working on the modern day series? Are you working on the Spider John series? Are you working on something completely different? What's going on right now in terms of
my agent cautioned me against going down too many rabbit holes. He kind of thought Spider and the detective series were enough for me to juggle right now. So my work in progress at the moment is the 2nd book in the detective series. I've got the first draft done, and so now it's mostly me going through it and fixing the things I did wrong and adding a little bit more meat to the bones, as it were. That's my usual process. I tend to write at a headlong pace. This happened, then this happens, then this happens, boom. And then I go back and remember to have my characters breathe a little bit and talk and think, etc. That's just how it works for me. I write chapter 1 in a headlong pace. Then when I sit down to write chapter 2, I read chapter 1 first to pick up the voice and to flesh it out a little bit as I go. And then by the time I get to the end of that, it's back to full speed ahead, and it's just boom, 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 boom. But, every writer is different, but that's the process that works for me. The nice advantage of doing it that way for me is that by the time I'm done with a first draft, it's in pretty good shape because I've edited all of the chapters as I go through the book. Edit chapter 1, then write chapter 2, edit chapter 2, then write chapter 3. There's still a lot of work to be done at the end of that first draft, but my first drafts are generally in pretty good shape.
Okay, time for that last break of the podcast. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets Podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets Podcast is for you. With the conclusion of my interview with author Steve Goble.
In terms of writing, is it something that you've always wanted to do, or did you come to that decision later in life? How did that experience work for you?
I wanted to be a writer probably before I finished reading The Hound of the Baskervilles and Treasure Island. Those two books are probably why I write pirate murder mysteries.
I was just going to say that pretty much explains Spider John.
Yeah, you take those two books, you put them in a blender, and what you get is my series. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved reading. I started reading at a young age, and my mom used to just give me hell for coming home from the library with paper bag full of books. And, you know, it was like, you just get 2 or 3. You don't need a whole bag, Stephen, blah, blah, blah. But I read them, and you know, I go into bookstores even today and collect them faster than I can read them, but I do get to them. And so I think if you love reading, I don't know how you could love reading and not want to try to be a writer too. And the fact that I worked most of my career in journalism, I was a reporter first, of course, but then I spent a lot of years as a copy editor. Reading other people's prose and helping to polish it and correct facts and things like that. You know, I've just always made my living off the written word in one way or another. And publishing novels was a lifelong ambition before I even got into high school. Now, I know that it took me a while to actually get to do it because there's this pesky thing called making a living that one has to do. And a career in journalism didn't leave me a lot of time for actual writing of fiction. So it wasn't until 2017 that I actually had a novel out in stores that people could read. But the desire was always there, and I was always working on some kind of short stories or whatever, you know, whenever I could find the time. I tend to write everything in short bursts of an hour or two. A lot of my writing is done on the weekends, sometimes an hour after I get home from work. But, you know, a little bit of writing every week, eventually you get to the end of the story. So that's how I do it.
Thank you. From your own experience then, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Yeah, I have a few things that I would encourage people to do. Number one is write the story that you're going to love. I do occasionally see people who seem to want to write the next Harry Potter or the next Sherlock Holmes, or you know, something that's like something that's already famous and well known. And I think, I mean, that can work. You know, you can come up with another cerebral detective or another fantasy novel involving young people, etc., and be successful. But I think you'll do your best work if you take the things that you really love and enjoy and infuse your work with that. I don't know that I would be a published novelist if I hadn't decided, you know what, why not a pirate murder mystery? I couldn't find anyone else who'd ever done it. I love pirates, I love murder mysteries. Why not combine them And I think, I've sort of built my own genre here and produced better books than I would have if I were trying to write Hound of the Baskervilles again, or my version of Rex Stout or whatever. So that would be number one. Write about stuff that you love. Don't worry about making it like somebody else's book or being the next Stephen King or whatever. The other thing I would remind people of is that you can fix anything in editing. I know some people who like to have everything be perfect the first time they type it, and they'll get bogged down in details and descriptions or whatever, and just never seem to get the ball rolling with the book. I sometimes, I'll admit this freely, I sometimes will just type, add some weather here when I'm going into a draft the first time, and get on with the story, and then come back later and do the descriptive things. As I'm reading through my first draft, I'll run into a note that says, describe the ship, dummy, or whatever. But that's just how I do it. But no matter how bad a first draft is, or how sloppy you think things are, or whatever, once you've got it down on paper or pixels, one or the other, you can go back and you can fix it. Or you can show it to a trusted reader or an editor, an agent or something, and get a little advice. Writing clubs, for instance, you might have a story that needs an awful lot of work, but you got to have that story first. You got to have something to show people. So, don't let your head get in the way and keep you from writing. Don't feel like you have to have everything worked out from the get-go. Just do the work and come back and fix the things that need fixed later. You do that a little bit of time every day or every week, and you'll eventually produce a novel.
I love it. Thank you. You're obviously a voracious reader and you love murder mysteries, but what other authors and genres do you tend to gravitate toward?
I do read a fair amount of science fiction. I prefer the good old stuff like Philip K. Dick and Robert Heinlein. Ursula Le Guin, I think, is just amazing. I will never be the kind of writer that Ursula Le Guin is. So I enjoy that kind of stuff. Short stories. I love anthologies, especially anthologies of ghost stories or murder mysteries. I like noir fiction. I tend to prefer that in short story form for the most part compared to novels. But all kinds of stuff. Old school fantasy stuff, Lord of the Rings. I enjoy that kind of stuff too. And the pulpy stuff, Conan the Barbarian. Those are stories where something's going to happen every time, guaranteed. They don't sit around with a lot of nasal gazing. There's always a plot and there's always some action. So that probably explains a little bit about my Spider John books too. Now that I think about it.
Slightly off topic, but you have a blurb on the back of A Bottle of Rum from Bradley Harper. He has also been on the podcast. Just curious if you if you know Bradley, or if you know how that relationship came about in terms of him having a review on the back of your book.
I've never met Bradley in person, but he is high on the list of people I want to buy a beer for someday. He's a medical person and very strong historian, good researcher, and his books are, I think, just terrific reads. I got a chance to read both of his published books so far, and I just think he's terrific. We met primarily because we both were published by 7th Street Books. And we have a Facebook group where the 7th Street authors support one another, answer one another's questions, root for each other. Sometimes we, maybe bitch and moan about the publishing industry a little bit. So I know Bradley through there, and he's an insightful person and a rather intelligent human being. I can't wait until we all get to go to book events again, and I can sit down with Bradley in a bar somewhere and just talk about writing historical fiction. I'm sure that he has some of the same problems I do, and we could help each other out a lot that way. But yeah, he seems to be a very, very wonderful guy.
Yeah, he does. And he's Santa Claus. I mean, really, how can you not want to meet him?
Well, you as soon as you look at a picture of Bradley, you know why he's Santa Claus. I mean,
yes, you do.
He's not just Santa Claus at Christmas. Bradley Harper is Santa Claus all the time.
And he's got a kind of a Santa Claus personality. He's a very kind, dear man. I really enjoyed our conversation. So
yeah, he just comes off that way just so naturally, and yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. So off topic, but I know you have a website. So if you can share your website as well as where people can interact with you on social media.
Sure. My website is stevegoble.com, and I am trying to get back into the habit of blogging there more regularly, and I need to add some buy buttons so people can purchase my upcoming books, etc. But that's just stevegoble.com. I'm also on Twitter, Steve Goble Fiction, and I have a Facebook page, Steve Goble Author, where I tend to post some miniature book reviews or articles from crime reads, etc., and talk to people there. So any of those places, hit me up.
So we've talked about a lot of different things, but is there any topic that we haven't covered that you had wanted to mention or bring up in terms of your books or writing?
No, I don't think so, other than to encourage people to shop for their books whenever possible at an independent bookstore somewhere where people just love books and have shelves full of them. Those businesses are in a hard place anyway, and with COVID, it just makes things worse. So those of us who do still read and love books, I know it's easy to just go online and get one from Amazon, but go to your bookstore and talk to the people there. They'll help you. Tell them what you like to read. They'll help you find stuff. It's a good experience. So definitely want to encourage people to do that as much as they can.
Agreed. Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to me about murder mysteries, and especially pirate murder mysteries.
Oh, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate people like you too who are doing this to help spread the word about books and let people know what's out there. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you once again to Steve for joining me and talking about not only his contemporary murder mystery, but also the historical fiction series of Spider John. I'm going to say it one more time because I don't get to say it often enough in life. Pirate murder mystery. What was that Super Bowl commercial a few years ago? Puppy monkey baby, something like that. That's kind of how I say pirate murder mystery in my head, except I think pirate murder mystery is more fun than whatever that commercial involved. So thank you to Steve for joining me. Thank you to you, as always, for joining me. You know I love spending time talking about books and sharing authors and books with you. So thank you, as always, for your support of the podcast and for joining me. Don't forget, if you are a fan of the podcast, to subscribe, do all those wonderful things on social media that really help us out. You can follow us on GSMC Book Review, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, if you could take just a minute and give us a nice review, 5 stars would be awesome. Written would be cool. Whatever's being, the universe is nudging you to do would be fantabulous, and I would appreciate it very much. I hope you will join me for tomorrow's Halloween episode. I'm going to talk about some cozy mysteries that I have been reading with a Halloween theme. you know that there's not going to be any horror. So if you're looking for a good book podcast with all the good Halloween horror, tomorrow's episode is not going to be that. But those of you who are regular listeners already knew that, right? So join me tomorrow for Halloween Cozy Murder Mysteries. And again, I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. Be safe. Eat chocolate. Eat. See, I can't even think of candy that's not chocolate. What do people like? Starbursts? I got nothing. Eat chocolate. Do me a favor and eat chocolate so that I don't have to. And while you're eating that chocolate, definitely take some time to get yourself lost in a good book.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.